Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. Remembering legend Kobe Bryant, his daughter, and 7 others killed in a helicopter crash 1 year ago. At least 9 lawsuits and 35 attorneys later, we look into the legal battles now ongoing.
This debris field is telling me that helicopter hit it at a high speed.
Prosecutors say Parkland school shooter Nikolas Cruz etched swastikas into his boots and on the apparent murder weapon. But should this evidence be shown to a jury? Attorneys for the so-called Doomsday cult mom say they can't speak to her in private. Should Lori Vallow Daybell be given a cell phone in jail? A judge approves a $17 million settlement for victims of Harvey Weinstein. The convicted former movie producer must now pay up.
He's not a sitting duck. He's not an easy target.
Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. 1 year ago, the world was shocked when news broke that Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and 7 others were killed in a helicopter crash. Law&Crime's Levy shows us where the investigation stands and what's coming next.
It's hard to believe that it's been exactly 1 year since Kobe Bryant, his daughter Gianna, and 7 other people were killed in that helicopter crash. As the families mourn, there are a number of lawsuits pending in the courts. Bryant's wife, Vanessa, and families of the other victims are suing the company that operated the helicopter.
There's definitely civil liability. This is not an act of God. This is not an act of nature. This is what appears to be pilot error.
That was aviation expert Andrew Maloney on Law&Crime the day after the crash last year. Pilot Era Zobian was trying to fly out of the clouds when the Swastika S-76B helicopter crashed into a mountain last year. Other lawsuits stemming from the crash, the helicopter company is suing 2 air traffic controllers, and Vanessa Bryant is suing Los Angeles County and its sheriff's department. And oddly enough, Vanessa Bryant faces a lawsuit from her own mother. But as far as the lawsuit over the crash goes, several factors are relevant, including the fog that morning. This time-lapse video shows the conditions. You can see just how thick that fog was before it cleared.
It looks like weather played a role here. I think the fog, the conditions, the visibility conditions were very poor. The LAPD had grounded its fleet. Now they may have a different mission profile than the helicopter that Mr. Bryant was flying on, but clearly there was a weather issue.
The NTSB is expected to release the results of its crash report on February 9th, and we will bring those results to you. For Law&Crime Daily, I'm Genette Levy.
Thanks, Genette. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Mike Korribanics and Terri Austin. Terri, talk to us about the last year for the Bryant family, their life, the litigation, and his legacy.
You know, Brian, this has been a very difficult year for the family for the obvious reasons that they lost their father, they lost a loving father and a loving daughter. So it's very difficult for Vanessa. And I think, and the whole family, the difficulty has only been compounded by these lawsuits. And the very first lawsuit was actually filed by Vanessa. And I think she obviously had a duty to file a wrongful death action against the company who operated the helicopter. They were definitely negligent. Maybe weather had something to do with it, but there was definitely negligence, and she will lose income for her family. So I think she made the right move when she filed this lawsuit. I just hope that it settles at the end of the day so they don't spend so much money on litigation.
Now, Mike, 5 lawsuits involve the fatal crash. The probable cause for that crash is supposed to be released February 9th, as Genette told us. What do you think we should be focusing on when it does come out?
Well, this is going to be a case that's going to be determined by experts. The expert testimony as to what exactly went wrong with the flight, what was the causation, that's the main issue of this case. This will be a case that will ultimately be a battle of the experts if it ever gets to trial.
All right. Now, Terri, 3 of the cases are about the invasion of privacy when the sheriff's department shared photos of the crash. What are the Bryant's chances of success there?
Oh, I think she has a very good chance of succeeding there. You know, it's like adding insult to injury. Obviously, she lost her husband. She lost her daughter. And then for these authorities to take pictures and to share those pictures, the lawsuit is an invasion of privacy, and it just has to show that there was public disclosure of a private piece of information. And so I do hope that she wins there. And it actually prompted a law in California for it to be a misdemeanor for first responders to take and publicize pictures like that.
Yeah. Now, the hope is the fact that that law occurred might be giving them some sort of wiggle room to win those invasion of privacy cases. And of course, you got the wrongful death suit, coming up. We'll get more information on February 9th. Thank you both. New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft has scored what looks to be his final legal victory in an alleged sex crimes case. A federal judge in Florida has ordered video that reportedly shows Kraft naked in a massage parlor paying for sex be destroyed. A judge ruled the sneak and peek warrant the Jupiter Police Department secured for the sting operation violated patrons' right to privacy. Prosecutors were then forced to throw out the misdemeanor solicitation charge against Kraft. Kraft's defense won their motion to keep the video of their client from ever being public. New video has been released in the arrest of singer Trey Songz at the AFC Championship football game. Kansas City police posted a video of the altercation they claim shows the singer, whose name is Tremaine Alden Neverson, punching an officer and putting them in a headlock. Kansas City police say fans complained about a man not wearing a mask, and the man then refused to leave when asked by private security and officers. That's when Trey Songz allegedly attacked the officer. He's since been released from jail. Charges are pending. One of the winners of the Food Network show, Worst Cooks in America, has been arrested for the murder of a 3-year-old girl. Ariel Robinson, along with her husband Jerry, are accused of beating their adopted daughter to death. Police in South Carolina say the couple inflicted a series of blunt force injuries to the child, who was adopted from the state's foster system. The Food Network has pulled season 20 of the show. Ariel Robinson was named the winner last August. If convicted, the Robinsons face up to 20 years in prison. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the shocking evidence the state wants to use against the accused Parkland school shooter. And later, will latest motion filed in the Doomsday cult duo case. Prosecutors in the Parkland school shooting case are seeking to introduce at trial photos of hand-etched swastikas in the suspect's gun and boots. Nikolas Cruz faces 17 counts of murder and 17 counts of attempted murder for the Valentine's Day 2018 massacre. Cruz is accused of taking an AR-15 firearm to go on a 6-minute-long shooting rampage at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Investigators say the shooter abandoned the gun in a stairwell. The weapon, seen here in photos submitted by the state, appears to have a Nazi swastika symbol etched into both sides of the magazine. Cruz confessed to the killing in a police interrogation.
How long have you had that gun?
A year or two.
A year or two? Did you buy it yourself?
Yes.
Where'd you buy it at? I mean, you're 19, right? So, did you buy it from a gun store or did you buy it from a friend?
Gun store.
A gun store.
Also submitted is this photo of Cruz's boot with a swastika etched into it. Records show Cruz was wearing the boot when he was arrested. In their motion, prosecutors say they want the jury to see these photos to prove identity and connect him to the scene of the crime. Quote, the state has no intention of arguing the racist nature of the symbol or that the defendant is a racist. 5 of the 17 victims were Jewish. Defense attorneys for Nikolas Cruz are asking for 2 weeks to review the motion before responding.
The state filed, I believe it was on Friday, a motion in limine, and we would ask for some time to respond to that in writing, please.
I'm going to give the Office of the Public Defender 2 weeks to respond to the state's motion in limine, so that will leave us at February 8th.
It's fine with the state, Your Honor.
That's fine, Judge. And that includes the other case, correct?
Yes, 8:45 on February 16th. I'll see you all then. Thank you.
No trial date has been set for Cruz's case. Prosecutors say they'll seek the death penalty if Cruz is convicted. Back for analysis is defense attorney Mike Korribanics and co-host Terri Austin. Terry, it doesn't make sense to me the grounds of the prosecutors pushing this. To say that the swastika on the gun and boot are going to be used to prove identity. Can you make heads or tails of that for us?
You know, Brian, I think it does actually make sense. I mean, we know identification is not an issue really at this point. There's a video, there are witnesses, but it doesn't hurt to corroborate the evidence. And if there's an identification mark, it just happens to be a swastika on both the boot and the gun, why not tie that together? It sort of corroborates what the video says and what the other witnesses might be saying. And it makes it clear that this is the actual individual who had that gun, who marched in there, and on, February 14th, shot all of these innocent people. So I think it makes sense.
Mike, I got to disagree. I'm sorry, Terry. I don't see how it does identity. Mike, the second I saw the swastika, I thought he's anti-Semitic. The second I realized the community he was in, he hates Jewish people. You're not going to be able to unring that bell once you show that swastika. Is that not the point of why you don't do this in court?
Yeah, well, Brian, I am very disappointed in the prosecutor's approach to this because they should be forthright and forthcoming with the court to avoid any appeals. They are doing that not for identification. It's not an issue. It's not an issue in the case, although just because you may stipulate that doesn't mean that the state is prohibited from putting forth more evidence. Their burden's beyond a reasonable doubt. If they want to add more evidence, they're more than welcome to. I think it's dangerous when they say they're only using it to corroborate, because I think an appellate court would say, no, you're not. You're looking at it to show he was anti-Semitic and this is what occurred. They should really watch and be careful and be very articulate on the evidential reasons they're trying to use this. Otherwise, they should leave it alone.
Yeah, my fear is that if they don't do it properly, this is going to get appealed and come back and forth and back and forth, and no one, not the victims, not anyone watching, wants that. But if you're going to call them anti-Semitic, do it and prove it. And I think they have all the evidence there. Thank you both for joining in on that conversation. Coming up on Law&Crime Daily, the payout the victims of the Harvey Weinstein should finally see. Plus, the so-called Doomsday cult mom's unusual request for jail after the break. A defense attorney for the so-called Doomsday cult mom wants to be able to talk to his client on a private cell phone while she awaits trial. Terri Austin has the latest on what's behind this jailhouse request.
Brian, attorney Mark Means says COVID-19 restrictions prevent him from speaking freely with Lori Vallow in jail, so he wants to give her a cell phone. Lori Vallow and her husband Chad Daybell are charged with concealing and destroying evidence while Vallow's children were reported missing. Authorities discovered the bodies of JJ and Tylee Ryan buried in a shallow grave in Daybell's property. Means submitted these photos from his meetings with Vallow into evidence. He claims he's unable to communicate privately with her. The sheriff's office confirmed 2 of their phone calls last March were accidentally recorded and later deleted. He's also requesting cameras in their meeting room be turned off. The next hearing for Vallow's case is scheduled for March 22nd. Forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan says, "We're still waiting for investigators to release the children's cause of death."
When are they going to pull the trigger on this thing and actually charge them with a homicide? We have these conspiracy charges and this sort of thing, and that's all fine and good. But, they don't have a lot of weight when you start to talk about, the abuse of a corpse or however they're framing this legally. But, what we're really waiting on is, these charges specifically relative to these deaths. And we found out that this is something that is on the horizon. It just has to be at this point. I think this goes back to this idea of her meeting with her attorney. This is highly complex, and this requires, regardless of how you feel about Lori Daybell, if you're planning a defense, this requires a very detailed, succinct creation of a timeline, just so that the defense has a way to understand this. So that's very important that they have the ability to meet.
Here for legal analysis is Mike Korribanics and Terri Austin. Mike, as strange as it may sound, this request by the defense, not being able to speak privately with your client means you don't really have attorney-client privilege in those conversations. Is that really the issue at heart here?
Absolutely. I've actually had, Brian, I've had these issues. It's horrible, the situation we're in with COVID. However, those telephone lines are usually recorded. Now, they said they taped 2 accidentally. That doesn't give the privilege away. And whether or not they could be used, somebody has access to intimate conversations between the attorney and his client. Suppose in this instance, they're talking about a plea deal, what would be accepted. And even though that's not used at court, if that gets back to the prosecution, they know where their strengths and weaknesses are in negotiating. It's totally unfair. I don't think it's an unreasonable request in this day and age with the pandemic. And he should be able to give a dedicated phone only to his number that she can't make outgoing calls to and he has to arrange. I don't see anything wrong with it. And I think it's going to be the wave of the future.
Now, Terry, what do you think? Is Val having her own private cell phone? I don't know if it's going to be a brick phone, flip phone, iPhone 12. I don't know. Is that the answer here, though?
You know, I actually agree 100% with Michael here. There's no question that COVID-19 has caused a lot of problems. And obviously, under the Sixth Amendment, you have a right to counsel, which means you should have these privileged conversations. You should have privacy. No one should be recording it, whether it's an accident or not. And so I do think that because of the pandemic, across the country, we're going to have to figure out solutions where attorneys can talk to their clients and have some reasonable expectation of privacy. So maybe you give her a flip phone that only calls to the attorney and has one number, but we need to do something to solve this really serious issue.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of those phones you can only call one person, like the ones you give to your 14-year-old kid or something like that. Thank you both. When we come back, the lawsuit years in the making, now approved for victims of Harvey Weinstein. A judge has approved the settlement payout for victims of convicted sex offender Harvey Weinstein. As Law and Crime's Jesse Weber tells us, it's going to be split amongst different parties.
The alleged victims of disgraced former producer Harvey Weinstein can now expect to be paid. A U.S. bankruptcy judge has officially approved a $35.2 million settlement for the liquidation of the Weinstein Company. As part of this deal, over $17 million has been set aside to pay out and resolve claims of sexual misconduct. Now, while some women have expressed their opposition, over 40 accusers have agreed to this plan.
After I was raped by Weinstein in 2005, I was confused. Why didn't I scream? Why didn't I fight? I thought I was stronger and I hated myself for being weak. That self-hate turned into shame and guilt. Shame that I never should have felt and guilt that was not mine to own. I didn't know that at the time and I didn't realize it for 12 more years. Harvey Weinstein stole a part of my self-worth, treating me like I was nothing, and I became fearful and mistrustful, not only of others but of myself. These feelings were unbearable to live with, and I pushed back the fear, shame, and guilt to move on with my life because that's how most of us survive. I was okay, or so I thought, until I read about the brave women speaking out with their stories just like mine. I hope that the sentence sends a clear message that times have changed and that more women need to speak out for themselves and that men and women need to speak out for each other. We need to show self-love and empathy to overcome centuries of illogical thinking that has normalized the sexual mistreatment of women. This is hopefully just the beginning, and the conversation must continue.
Paul Zumbro, an attorney for the Weinstein Company, says that his team is pleased with the ruling, especially since, quote, there is now a mechanism that allows victims to receive compensation without having to endure the hardships and uncertainties of litigation. Now, while the agreement also provides for legal expenses, no funds are going to be allocated to pay for Weinstein's own legal bills.
If you're going to bring a claim, listen, he's not a sitting duck. He's not an easy target. He's going to defend these claims, whether they be the civil claims or the criminal claims in Los Angeles. He's not giving up. He's vested in his defense, both criminal and civil, and he's going to defend himself against these allegations.
And as for Weinstein himself, well, he's currently serving a 23-year prison sentence in New York for sex crimes and is still awaiting trial in L.A. on other sexual assault charges. I'm Jesse Weber for Law and Crime.
Thanks, Jesse. Back one last time for analysis is Mike Korribanics and Terri Austin. Mike, $17 million sounds like a lot until it's split between about 50 victims. Those with the most serious claims seem to be getting about $500,000. How does that sit with you?
Well, there's a practical point of this is obviously Weinstein has a lot of money. There were debts that were owed. The money supposedly went away. I'd like to see a better following of the money, but what you have in your hand is better than what you may miss out by time trial comes when there may be no money left. It doesn't seem to compensate, but it seems to be the best situation they have.
Exactly. Now, Terry, approximately 40 women voted for and 8 against this settlement. According to some of their lawyers, it limits their ability to seek other remedies. Is this a win or something just short of that?
You know, Brian, I think it's a win, but it's a lopsided win. It provides, I think, too much money for Weinstein's company and for the lawyers, and not enough money as far as the victims are concerned. And that really should be our number one concern. I mean, the amount was actually reduced early on. They said it was going to be $24 million for the victims, and now they've reduced it to the $17 million. So I don't think it's enough for the victims, even if the serious crimes have a higher amount. But the good news, and this is what Mike said, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, the good news is that it'll be resolved and that they won't have to spend a lot of money on litigation because, as we all know, attorneys' fees really do eat up the sums that could be available for these victims.
Well, maybe Mike Korribanics' attorney's fees. I'm still working for free, but absolutely, Terry. Thank you both for joining us. And you know what? I really like where we're coming at this because I think the most important thing that I will agree with you, Terry, is the finality for those victims. And we can call them victims now, especially because he's convicted, because having to relive this not only through just life, the criminal case, but then doing it again in a civil case, no person should have to do that. And I think even though the number isn't enough, I think it does fall just short of justice. It's done. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.